But welcome everyone. We've had really wonderful RSVPs to this event, and it's so exciting to see all of the interest in this special issue and this topic in our contributors and our event today. This is the first time that all of us are in a Zoom room together, so it's really fun and exciting to see everyone and have this opportunity for a dialogue. And seeing still attendees coming in, trickling in as the event's starting. So just give us 1 second before we start. All right, I think it's leveled up. So thank you, everyone. It is my pleasure to host and welcome you today to the St. Petersburg Laser. My name is Erika Rubi. I'm the editorial director at Leonardo, the International Society for the Art Sciences and Technology. We are here today as guests of the St. Petersburg Laser, the Leonardo Art Science Evening Rendezvous, here to discuss chaos and cosmos. This is a special issue of Leonardo Journal that has just come up. It is arriving in mailboxes this week. This is a fully bilingual issue, Russian and English, on space art. It is a companion to the Sci-Fest 13th edition on chaos and cosmos, which is organized by CYLAND Media Art Lab. And I would like to turn over to Lidii Gryaznová, who is the laser host, and she will speak a little bit before we begin our dialogues today. So welcome, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Erika. And I'll try to keep it short to save time for our respected contributors. And my speech has 2 parts. First of all, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to everyone involved in this project and this event. And secondly, I would like to say a few words about the journal itself as I see it as a co-editor. First of all, many thanks for all the authors for your innovative and insightful articles, and thanks to everyone who is part of this presentation today. Thank you for making visible and recognizable the wide variety of field of knowledge and practices, areas of keen interest and aspirations, ways of development and discoveries. It showed the cosmos/house and their relation to each other as rich and multi-layered universe of the ways to perceive the world and one lives in art and science. I'm very nervous, but I try to keep myself down. Reading of this issue may be perceived as a set of routes where from one starting point, you can go in different directions, where well-known roads intersects with just emergent trails, where there will be crossroads and the turns of hidden from perspective view paths and new barely visible trails of footprints. At the same time, it's also the movement through the combination of different kinds of times, past, present, future, personal, intimate times and histories, and shared common time of history with capital H. This history is dense and heavy as an element from 6th row of Mendeleev's periodic table, at least 120 names of artists, philosophers and thinkers, engineers, scientists, movie directors, writers, and other public figures mentioned here. So each text welcomes and gives the orienters to dig deeper in the proposed directions. Please forgive me the lack of specifics. I believe the authors presented here today will tell a lot more better about their contributions and writing these themes. We want to make this issue accessible as possible for readers. And from this month, my colleagues will start the distribution of print copies in international culture and educational institutions, libraries, and artistic spaces. And it's very important to recall and mention here that this issue is a result of the joint efforts and forces of a lot of people. Behind the screen are CYLAND, Sci-Fest, and Leonardo teams, staff of MIT Press, our colleagues from Laser who works with me and Erika on this project on different stages of its development, curators, editors, translators, reviewers, proofreaders, designers, administrators, printers, and technicians, and so on else. Our supporters and colleagues, thank you so much for this. The large international project is always we, people who stay invisible for readers, but without whom it wasn't possible. Thank you all involved in the creation of the special issue and even for being with us. And this was the first part, and with a lot of thank you. And I would like also share my own thoughts about my personal experience to work on this project. And my own participation from the beginning to the end was online and remote. In 2020, my world, once again, as if I returned back in my childhood, rapidly shrink to a size of a small area of one apartment and one city, where I have direct access to small radius of life. At the same time, I've been still existed remotely in constant contact with many other people scattered around the world. It was regular switching without any apparent movement, from a physical singular presence in the room to distant and virtual plural contacts. It makes me think about the sense of borders and distances and their specificity. I'm thinking about floating scale and perception and distinction of the world. How the world may shrink and expand, be close and distant, split on mine and theirs. Since June, when we started this project, I've been returning my mind constantly to the image we selected for the cover, a fragment of the artwork by Anna Franz, number 0. This is a great structure filled with objects and people, living and artificial beings. If considered as a metaphor of collectively building structure and order, potentially it may grow infinitely in the continuous and unstoppable cognition of the universe. But what if we found the chaos inside the structure? Today, it seems easy to define where is chaos located now. It is undisturbed and certainly accompanying the whole 2020, which is held on Paul's predictable and planet life. Right now, we all could have been in live conversation held as part of CYFES in St. Petersburg. Then there another question comes: from where is cosmos begin and what exactly hide up in this name? It's very comfortable to think it's somewhere in the middle of nowhere. I don't know exactly where, definitely not here. From the life point of view, it doesn't make sense to exercise regularly in locating oneself in one row with the star clusters. It's extremely wide scale of world, but until what limit of contraction I could shrink it to do, not to lose the sense of the world in the drift through shallow routine. This problem doubles when upon the existing world I overlay the ways of knowledge it. The areas of structure and ordered knowledge become itself the chaos where it's easy to last. There is a way too much of everything. A radical and tempted movement. Don't leave at all, even when it's possible, my small radius, both mentally and physically. It's a very comfortable idea. It helps to distance and locate to small area of everyday life. Моя хата с краю, я ничего не знаю. A Russian saying means the position of cautious and fearful villager who lives on the outskirts and who don't know anything and don't bother with it. These invisible borders of unknown promise a small and predictable world, but they may shrink the perspective to one route, and only route, and the aforementioned grid structure. This supporting frame of force cognition will turn into a cage. In the school, I had studied D for physics and astronomy. The interest to grasp the science word explanation, how it works, was eclipsed with opaque wall of formula and charts. This made me think that this is too much for me. It's better not to try it at all. While I'm reading and rereading texts of this issue, I saw the great examples of the ability to keep an inner freedom and persistence to stay on track. Keep moving despite of complexity of the relationship between all the actors of chaos with cosmos duality. I wish I come back in my childhood to rescue myself from the idea to refuse to know, to save a curious interest to the natural world without scaring to do not understand it in the only one correct and legitimate way proposed by school. Months of working on this issue reminds me once again that it's okay to do not know. And here I put a space for a large and unknown word. I think it's a very useful skill to be able to admit it, keep moving, and be open for it, especially when this unknown is starting to knock on your door as it was happening in 2020. And once again, to the grid from the cover. In what direction my own grid will move, define what will be selected and absorbed, and what remains unnoticed. It's not about striving to total erudition and expertness in all areas. It's all about the readiness to keep eyes open and be aware of who is here among with us, with me under the starry sky and beyond it. Lately, I found what Pierre Bourdieu, French sociologist and philosopher, said about Paul Valéry. The poets are lucky. They don't need to build coherent argumentation. They have an advantage to express everything with one formula. Maybe I will say ridiculous and obvious banality, but upon this formula, which I will equal to artist image, is a readiness to perceive and explore world, how it expressed in the constant encounters of cosmos and chaos, which is started here between and inside us. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. And thank you for everything that you've done in not only the creation of this event, but really the backbone of this special project. So thank you. I can't thank you enough for your partnership and really the wonderful relationships that we've been able to build through this project with all of the wonderful people here today, and others, as you have mentioned, the enormous teams behind us who enabled the project to go through. So to talk a little bit about the format of how we're going to proceed today, we have 5 structured conversations between pairs of authors who contributed to this journal. Each conversation is allotted about 15 minutes. We are going to allow for questions from the audience at the very end after all of the discussions occur. I will be introducing everyone, giving a little bit of a bio, and then allowing the pairs to discuss freely. So our order of events today, our first pair is Natalia Kolodzei and Anik Bureau. Second, Elena Gubavina and Diana Eйтон-Шенкер. Next, Alexandra Dementieva and Daniela De Paulis. Fourth, Olesia Turkina and Saskia Vermeulen. And wrapping up is Bettina Forget and Lindy Elkins-Tänton. So first, I would like to introduce Natalia Kolodzei and Anik Bureau. Natalia's contribution to the February 2021 special issue of the Leonardo Journal is titled Cosmic Inspirations and Explorations by Soviet Nonconformist Artists. Natalia is an honorary member of the Russian Academy of Arts, a curator and art historian specializing in the art of Russia and Eastern Europe. She is executive director of the Kolodzei Art Foundation and, along with Tatiana Kolodzei, owner of the Kolodzei Collection of Russian and Eastern European art. Since 1990, she has curated over 80 shows internationally. She is an author and editor of multiple publications. She'll be in conversation today with Anik Bureau, who has written It's a Beautiful Name for a Satellite, Paradoxical Art Object Somewhere Between Politics and Poetics. Anik is an independent Paris-based French art critic and curator. She's the director of Leonardo Ola, which is the Leonardo sister organization in France. And she's the organizer of the Leonardo Space Art and Science Workshops in Paris. So welcome, Natalia and Anik.
Thank you, Erika. And we have tried to structure our conversation with Natalia. And I really would like to thank Lydia and you, Erika, and everybody who have put together this special issue of Leonardo. I mean, it's very impressive. And I'm a bit intimidated to speak here and to be part of it. So we have decided to ask questions with Natalia. So my first question for Natalia is, we're going from cosmos to chaos in this journey. So in the United States of America, the main metaphor to space exploration was the notion of frontier, the final frontier of Star Trek. And in the Soviet Union, cosmos and its notion of perfection and order was the key concept. And it was very strongly related to communism as the goal for a future perfect society somewhere else outside the Earth. So my question to Natalia is, how has the non-conformist Soviet art that she's presented, that you are presenting, Natalia, in and analyzing in your article, emerged in this context, and where does it situate itself?
First of all, I would like to thank Leonardo and Silent Media Art Lab for opportunity to participate in the issue. And Nick, thank you so much for your question. Late 50s were turbulent but exciting times. It was a spiritual awakening with the traces of utopian hope. It was denunciation of Stalin, return of political prisoners, and easing of aesthetic restraints. All of it created an environment for encouraging artistic creativity. Also, it is important to note that nonconformist artists do not share any particular platform or aesthetic purpose, but were united by friendship and the struggle for their rights as individuals. Many nonconformist artists were inspired to escape the confines of the Soviet system, not by confronting it directly, but by exploring the spiritual dimension within the self as they were living in a void. For some, formalism was the escape from the ideological reality of the everyday Soviet life. At the same time, it was the means of the protest against the pressure of the Soviet ideological system. The easing of aesthetic restraints in combination with the interest in the heritage of the Russian avant-garde and cybernetics and exploration of space, of course, the Sputnik in 1957, and Yuri Gagarin, the first person to fly in space in 1961, all of it contribute to flourishing in interest in geometrical abstraction and kinetic art in Soviet nonconformist art circles. If for the Soviet government, launch of Sputnik meant emergence of the Soviet government, of the Soviet Union as a military superpower, and promotion of the new political, military, technological, and scientific development, and also it marked the US-Russia space race, nonconformist artists took a different approach of peaceful celebration and exploration of infinite possibility the cosmos may offer, as well as the infinity of the universe. Vyacheslav Klichuk, an architect by training, he combined an interest in engineering, science, technology, outer space, and art in order to develop and propagate kinetic art. Klichuk was always interested in process of form building, overcoming the limits of materials and existence of form in space. For example, he created the idea of self-mounted, he created the outer space radio telescope in 1967, as well as he entertained the idea of self-mounted city in the outer space. However, the artists were not welcomed in a top secret government project in the Soviet Union, as well as it would forfeit any potential to travel outside of the Soviet Union, as well as the continuation of the artistic process. So many projects remained as models. Francisco Infante is another artist who created several architectural projects entitled Architecture of Artificial Systems, Autonomy in Outer Space in 1971. For a very brief moment in his artistic career, he was considering the idea of art becoming a technology, and as such is destined to be created in outer space as objects of architecture. But overall, the cosmos offered multiple, limitless possibility for imagination and fantasy. It's deprived from earthly time and biological clocks, so it may offer a new realm for creativity and inventions. Anik, and how do you see relationship between the artistic satellite and your notion of cosmos?
Actually, what you said about friendship connection and the fact that there is not one single aesthetics can apply also to the artists that have proposed project of artistic satellite. I want here to explain the difference I make between artistic satellite and satellite art. Artistic satellite is not using satellite or satellite data to create artworks, but it's to create a satellite that is the artwork, and vice versa, to create an artwork that turns out to be a satellite orbiting the Earth. As an inaugural gesture, of course, de facto Sputnik has expanded the public space that we inhabit, and artistic satellite are public art, or art in public space. I think it was pretty much like what you said. The human presence in space has been built in a context of tensions between the two blocks. But simultaneously, there was hope for a better future, for a peaceful common space, for a place where peace could happen, for a new culture to emerge. And several of those artistic satellites express this hope, and maybe it was to counterbalance the competition of the two blocks. And for instance, just to name three, the Hours Orbiting Unification Ring Satellite, which is a project by Arthur Woods, would have been this ring in the night sky to celebrate millennium and to celebrate peace. I'm not going to develop all the projects, just to mention a few. And I would like to say that none of them have been launched, actually. But also with Keo, Jean-Marc Philippe wanted to create a satellite collecting precious symbolic elements from the earth, including soil and the voice of the contemporary humans all over the world, as a repository for the future humans 50,000 years from now. And so it was, all those projects had some peaceful global approach, uniting humans really, and it was to celebrate peaceful events. And also it was to symbolize the fact that we are only one on this earth, that now that we heard, that we had witnessed that the earth was small, without borders, unique and fragile. And I think it was really, it's where this idea of a cosmos happens there. And of course, they were facing some difficulties. And this is a question that I would like you to develop a little bit about the non-conformist Soviet artists. What, could you go more into the difficulties that they encountered and how they relate to the, what I call the official Soviet space voice? Because it was really, there was a kind of, strong aesthetics in this Soviet space voice.
Thank you so much for your question. Now we're coming from the ideas of cosmos to the chaos. Manege exhibition and the censorship renewal in 1962, and of course replacement of Khrushchev by Brezhnev brought us to 1970s. And when the artist was seeking to make the world aware of the Soviet censorship and harassment, and of course the breakthrough exhibition in 1974, where two artists I discussed in my essay, Vitaly Komar and Alexander Melamed, participated in the exhibition. It's all kind of brought back some hope, but it was dissolved completely by the new attack of the ideology by the government. And this renewed censorship and harassment also included, of course, deportation of Alexander Solzhenitsyn and imprisonment of physicist Andrei Sakharov. And also it's precipitated the immigration of many artists, including Komar, Melamed, Sokov, to the West. And this unexpected crackdown kind of led us to a stifling period of stagnation and feeling of eternity of the Soviet system. And for example, for artists like Belenok, who was born in Karagot, not far from Chernobyl, and it was this village was abandoned after 1986 disaster. Like for him, the main theme was like alienation of the individual confronted by these immeasurable forces. And Belenok transcribes the Soviet reality by evoking a sense of conflict and complicated human interactions. He limits his palette to black and white as opposing forces of nature between like real and imagined worlds. And of course, conservatism in politics and this feeling of eternity, but at the same time understanding the absurdity of the system. This duplicity influenced conceptual artists like Ilya Kabakov, and his decision to treat his art as an arena for working with the social, political, and historical Soviet discourse. While he was in Moscow in 1985, he created his installation, The Man Who Flew into Space from His Apartment. And it was where a fictional character, lonely dreamer, develops like an impossible project to fly alone in cosmic space. Kabakov used space travel and the idea of cosmos as realm for freedom, where a person could escape ideological confines by just flying to space. Kabakov, upon his arrival to New York, Kabakov presented his installation at his first exhibition, one man show in the Ronald Feldman Gallery in New York in 1988, and later showcased this installation in 2005 at the Russia exhibition at the Guggenheim, and later presented again this installation in the shows Ilya and Emilia Kabakov, Not Everyone Will Be Taken to the Future, at the Tate, Hermitage, and Tretьяков Gallery. And this work now in collection in your hometown in Center Pompidou.
Yes.
And yes, and so coming back to your essay, Nick, you write that many projects from the 1980s include a light component which makes them visible from Earth. And then you continue by asking, do we have the right to put objects in other people's skies, even for peaceful and cultural purposes, without asking them first? And to whom does the sky belong? And can you please elaborate how do ethical questions and the position from the scientists, from the science community, from the astronomers, change or evolved the nature of the works and the artistic process?
And it's where chaos really enter into play with with light and orbit pollution coming from satellite, and actually we are not artistic satellites currently. Actually, the impact on the achievement or not of the art project and their evolution do not come from the opposition of scientists to light pollution. I would say that raising the money to build the satellites and technological issues were more important in this idea, in this evolution of the projects. But as I said, space, the cosmos, and especially the Earth orbit is a public space. And how you put art in a public space is never neutral, and it's often related to some kind of power. And the change in the night sky has been an ethical question which was raised with the work of Jean-Marc Philippe and also of James Pridgen who both wanted to put in the sky satellites that were bright, that were visible from the Earth with a lot of light. And Jean-Marc Philippe wanted to create a ring of light, a ring. It would have been appeared as a ring around the Earth. And it was truly criticized by that, not only by astronomers, but by people in Africa and elsewhere that were saying, but who are you to change my night sky? Who are you to put those objects into my sky? And he addressed it, and he addressed it through UNESCO also, trying to write a proposal so that there would be some kind of committee preventing people to put anything like anywhere as they would like. Needless to say that it didn't go that far. There is another issue beyond light pollution, which is the orbital debris pollution, which is getting more and more critical. And Richard Clark created an artwork called Collision that showed all the debris that are monitored currently and that are really clogging the Earth orbit. And what I think is really interesting is nothing has really changed, unfortunately. Those people tried, I mean, Richard Clark, Jean-Marc Philippe tried to address the issue of, okay, well, as an artist, what is my responsibility to do, and putting a satellite into orbit that is visible from Earth and adding to the pollution. And today we can see that when Trevor Pallian decided to create his non-functional satellite, which was basically a super brilliant balloon, he did not seem to care that much about both light pollution and orbit pollution. And we're not going to say anything about Elon Musk, who is launching thousands of satellites every month. And with this, line that you can see in the sky, this bright line of these trains of satellites. And we have for sure entered chaos in this respect. And if I have 2 minutes to add, the space world, cosmic world, is a very much man world. We're very much into competition and ego projection. And I have to say that there are very, very, very few women that did artistic satellite project. And now we have Fabi Borges in Brazil, who is working with a CubeSat, and that the real shift was with the CubeSat. CubeSats are very small, 10 by 10 centimeter satellites. They are much easier to create, to produce, to launch. And it's more on the DIY approach. And today we can really juxtapose ethical, political, and decolonization questions and discourse about space. And it is done through art and sometimes through those artistic satellites. I'm not sure that we have, do we have more time?
For now, I think we will move on to the next conversation, but I do believe that a lot of the topics that we've touched on so far will be picked up by other speakers, and we do have time for a full discussion following with the attendees as well. So I'm very excited about continuing this conversation. Thank you very much to Anik and Natalia for contributing today, and to the journal, and to culture and space and art. I would like to now recognize and welcome our next pair. Our next pair to discuss is Elena Gubanova and Diana Eйтон-Шенкер. Elena wrote for the special issue of Leonardo Journal an article called The Observer Effect, the Artistic Image as a Metaphor for Scientific Interpretations of the Natural World. Elena Gubanova is an artist and curator who works in the fields of painting, sculpture, installations, and video. Her works have been exhibited at major Russian and foreign venues. Since 1990, she has worked in collaboration with Ivan Govorkov. You have to correct me if that was not correct. She lives and works in St. Petersburg, Russia. Diana Eйтон-Шенкер has written the editorial for this issue. It is titled The Heart of Leonardo. Diana is the CEO of Leonardo, the International Society for the Art Sciences and Technology. She is the executive director of the Arizona State University Leonardo Partnership, and she is ASU Professor of Practice in the School for the Future of Innovation in Society and the School of Arts, Media, and Engineering. Welcome, Elena and Diana, to our conversation today.
Yeah, hello. Hello. Thank you very much. Yeah. Diana, who will start? I think me. Okay. Hello everybody. I'm very happy to take part in this very wonderful event, and thank you for everybody who did it. And I'm very everybody so sorry, a little bit shy. So my first question for Diana will be about relationship between artists and scientists. Like Natalia said before about the situation in Russia, in the 5th of the last century in the Soviet Union, there was a big discussion called Physics and Lyrics. And Soviet intellectuals were divided in two parts, technical and humanitarian. The state supported scientists and engineering and did not like progressive artists and writers, many of whom became dissidents. And physics and lyrics could not find the common language between each other. And then it seems that the future belongs the scientists and belongs the technologies. And so our communism is based on the technologists and scientists, not on the artists. So, and as I can say now, until now, scientists in Russian have very traditional view on art. Yeah, you know, they are like impressionism, realism, you know, Russian realism, you know, something like that. And my question is, what Diana can say about that? Has the situation changed now? Because I understand that artists are looking for new tool in art. And first, you know, we know a lot of reasons that the artists collaborate with scientists, but they can want to find a new tool of art. But why do you think, Diana, the scientists want to collaborate with artists? And is it connect with a new view of the future of the role of science in society? And is now the situation in the world has changed a little bit? What do you think about that?
Well, thank you so much, Elena. It's a question that gets to the heart of Leonardo, actually, this resistance and relationship you're asking about between science and art. And I would say that it's not so much that artists are only looking for new tools, but that we're all looking for new ways of seeing and being ourselves in relation to each other and the universe. And that means calling on all tools. That means scientists calling on the tools that have been thought of as art, and technologists calling on sources of inspiration that have not yet been dominant in their work. This notion of separating out artists and scientists, or artists tools from the tools of technology and science is, I don't think, a natural or a necessary notion. I think that it's an artifice we have constructed or resigned ourselves to at some point along the way when we decided that we needed to differentiate disciplines. But if you look at the not just new ways of engaging arts with science and technology, but truly the old ways of engaging in the imagination, in our creativity, it was always integrating arts, science, and technology. These are simply different aspects of our unquenchable human quest for curiosity and for creating something new or beautiful or provocative. And we use the tools that are most accessible to us or most appropriate for where we're headed. But common to artists and scientists and technologists are core creative practices of generating content, of offering creative critique, of creative contemplation, of creative connection, communication, and of collaboration. And I think that the collaborations we're increasingly seeing that were addressed with the history of some initiatives in space art, and that we're looking at now through our consideration of chaos and cosmos. These are integrations of art science. So in terms of what's new, it's both reclaiming and excavating our original creative selves, and it's reimagining, redesigning how we express that fundamental creative impulse that I think is so humanizing for us in our navigation of chaos and cosmos. One way that we look at the creative understanding and exploration of chaos and cosmos that you touch on, Elena, in your beautiful article, The Observer Effect, is addressed at the very end. So spoiler alert, I'm going to start with the ending of your piece and ask about your conclusion that people, whether artists, scientists, or otherwise, defined or transdisciplinary in our approach to the compelling challenges of our time, what is space, what is chaos, what is cosmos, have trouble constantly thinking about the expansiveness of the universe. But we can do that, glimpse that expanse within our own lives, the globality of the world in our lives. And I was very inspired by your writing about your artwork that takes on the personal elements together with the universal elements of time, of space, and of home and boundaries. So I'm curious how your sense of home and boundaries is not only reflecting the larger chaos and cosmos, but how do you see our sense of home and boundary changing? Not just the boundaries between art and science, but the boundaries between private and public, the boundaries that our experience of COVID has forced us to rethink of what is home and what is the boundary. And I wanted to hear more of your thoughts on home and boundary and the personal and the universal.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I think we, all of us, feel this body now, and I can only say about my life, because my art very close to my life, and for example, as a child, I was raised between art and science, and my father was an astronomer, and my mom was a musician. So this discussion, or this life, not discussion, but life between sky and music, sky and art, sky and paintings. In my home, it was every day. And for example, I can say, when my dad asked my mom once, how do you think about the moon effects of the earth? What do you think about that? And she laughed and think, and then she answered, the moon is causes of conception. The moon is cause of conception. So maybe my English not so good, but it was her poetry answer, because of the moon is the beginning of the life, human life. And he expected that he will say about the moon like a planet, how it's moving, but she answered that very poetry. And this is a different, and this is but it is a two different approaches. But I use these two different approaches, and in my work, in my paintings, and try to combine them and try to do both of them. So something like that I can answer.
That's beautiful. It's so important, and I think courageous to claim this personal space and poetry in the realm of how we understand the universe and ourselves in space. It's been I don't think missing, but an undervalued essential element in the sense of space exploration that was referenced before as superpower race. And there is perhaps a gender dimension of that, as well as a discipline dimension of that. And the more fluid we are across genders, perspectives, boundaries, disciplines, I think the more healthy and powerful the course of exploring space and chaos and cosmos becomes. And our sense of space as defined by a superpower race is no longer the realm of militarized domination, but of unleashed imagination, of creativity, and of hope. So I want to come back to you, Elena, and talk a little bit about hope in the example of collaboration, and how important collaboration has been in the examples of art that you share in your article and in your life's work. And in thinking about collaboration, I'm wondering where and how that sheds light and offers hope for you as an artist practitioner. And then I'd be happy to share some thoughts on collaboration with this issue and our organizations to wrap up our conversation and give space to our colleagues.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you very much for the question. What did the, why is it in Russian? I'm sorry. Thank you, Diana, very much. And my main collaboration and my gender collaboration is collaboration with my husband, and during all my life, 30 years. So it's interesting because as I understand the question particularly about genders, this is a question about genders. How can men and women work together? And we have a funny answer. Every work of art, our art, is like a baby. Yeah, we endow them with the feeling and ideas. And when we work together on a project, we follow the laws of nature. We both take part in the first stage of conception. This is an emotional, inspired, and selfless moment. And we both get excited and receive pleasure and satisfaction. And she was born, baby, in love and peace. So, but later, father leaves the baby to the mother hand, you know, if you know what I mean, because his job is over and the mother takes care of rise and look after the baby. And then when the baby has grown up, the father comes back to enjoy and be proud of her. So of course it's a job, but in short, in our case, my about relationship, the collaboration between in my job, in my work belongs the scientist. My husband responsible for the conceptual side, and I responsible for the feeling and emotional, and this is how we make a major project installation in even paint pictures. And the same way I try to ask my father, for example, astronomer, because he's a very realistic and he really scientist, and he don't like idealism, something like that. And he asked me every time, what do you mean? What do you want to, how do you want to show it? Because I don't believe that it can be shown. For example, the white noise problem, because he has a book with white noise, about white noise. And 20 years, I tried to make installation about white noise. But when I showed them this installation, only last year, he said me, oh, now I understand what you mean. And I asked him, Dad, is it right that do you think that it's right that I show you idea about white noise? And he said, now, yes, I understand. It is right, because I feeling this idea. I feeling my idea about this, and it's very important that for scientists and artists, the collaboration like that scientists understand that it is not boring, it is not stupid, the art project. It's include very emotional, very human part of this. And it's very important for other people to understand this problem, because it's not only them, the problem, only the scientists, it's a problem for all of us.
So it's interesting. I appreciate your sharing so much. Again, that the personal with the universal, and how we can all relate to those two levels where we engage and live our lives, do our work. I actually wasn't thinking about gender in collaboration, but I do think that we bring masculine and feminine aspects within each of us to our work. So I certainly see that playing out in the collaboration between partners, and recognize the value of bringing that whole self and the fluid nature of our gender and engendered strengths and vulnerabilities to collaborate on this kind of a project, and others navigating chaos and cosmos. So it's with that in mind that I want to turn this back over to Erika and invite some of the further thoughts for today.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm regretting that we have so short a period of time for each of these conversations, but again, I am glad to open it up after we all have the opportunity to do the dialogues for questions from our participants. I do see some coming up in the chat panel. I would like to take a moment to just let everyone know that we do not accept any unprofessional chat from attendees, and anyone who is not participating professionally or respectfully will be removed. And unfortunately, we did need to remove an attendee just now during that last discussion. So just to let you know that that type of behavior will not be tolerated, and I apologize to all of the panelists who did see that. So thank you for allowing me to just make that one point. And with that, I'm happy to announce and introduce our next pair of discussants, conversants, is Alexandra Dementieva and Daniela De Paulis. Alexandra participated in our special issue with the article Homo sapiens, Meneste Tardigrada, Class and Umwelt, a dialogue on interspecies organic data flow, which was co-authored with Sandrine Curie. And Alexandra is a multidisciplinary artist. Her installations use dance, music, cinema, and performance. She raises questions related to social psychology and theories of perception, suggesting solutions to them by contemporary artistic means, and her works have been exhibited worldwide. Daniela De Paulis wrote for us The Metamorphosis of a Periplaneta Americana. Daniela is a former contemporary dancer, a transdisciplinary artist, a licensed radio operator, and radio telescope operator. She's a member of the IAAA SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Permanent Committee. Welcome, Alexandra and Daniela.
Thank you, Erika, for the introduction, and I'm very pleased to be part of this panel, and actually I'm really pleased to be part of a panel with so many women, and I think it's great to have such an event organized to present our work with space, which is somehow underrepresented, as Nick somehow also pointed out earlier. I would like to say to, well, I hope I pronounced it correctly, Alexandra, that I really enjoyed reading your paper, and I was really struck by the similarities of our thinking process. And we both seem to highlight the life of insects, and even in your case, even smaller beings. I think overall, more than really maybe presenting a question, what I really found very interesting is how you highlight the possibility of communicating empathically amongst beings, which is also something that I speak about in my paper. And that point really resonated with me. So you mentioned the possibility of communicating with a multiplicity of sensorial tools, which humans don't have, such as, for example, radio perception. And these sophisticated tools are actually not completely natural to these extraterrestrial beings that you beautifully described in your paper, that come to visit Earth and try to somehow conciliate humans amongst themselves, so try to bring some empathy amongst human beings. So actually, what I also found interesting is how these beings co-create a vision of reality, which I think we also do as humans, although we might not have it. We might not have this televirtuality that you mentioned. So the beings that these quonians, these inhabitants of this fantastic planet, just to quote a fantastic French film from the 70s, they have the possibility of creating these multiple images, multiple painting of reality in real time. So just, I think something kind of led me to also question the importance, for example, of conflicts in our culture, human culture. So although we find conflicts often an obstacle to progress, I feel that actually conflicts are really important in the evolution of culture in general and of our reality. So how do you see this? I mean, is politics, for example, anything that these quonians might ever have to deal with, or they were somehow, is this almost utopian reality, as you describe it, something that completely bypass such a human arena, such as politics, or the politics of conflicts? Or should conflicts be completely ignored, or should we instead maybe make something out of it?
Thank you very much, Daniela, for a question. And I have to say also that I was very amazed to read your articles, because for me it was some kind of the similarity of the approach, but in totally different way. And also I would like to tell that I collaborate for several years already with Sandrine Curie. She is a biologist, she is PhD in biology, she lives in Paris, and unfortunately she can't take part in our conversation, but also this is was for us when I was writing this article, we will always ping pong each other, because she is really in biology, so she always looking for different kinds of the aspects that could be not really highlighted by me. So just like to say thank you very much for Sandrine, who is not present with us. And yes, but my article also, this is some part of my artistic démarche to work with the different subject, but trying to have some kinds of the distance from the subject, because like, you know, in historical events, more or less, we are saying that we are really can analyze and to do well understanding what is happening when we have some times elapsed from the event. So at some moment I decided that I think that I could be extraterrestrial, and it gives me this time, space from the human and from the in other events that's happening here. Well, at least I imagine it like this. And because of this, I create this possibility to be Quanian, and Quanian is not anthropomorphic at all. So just me, I am some sort of the synthesis of the two DNA of the Quanian and human. And you are asking about conflict. Yes, in a human way, definitely we use some conflict. I don't speak about war conflict, but just like different kinds of the opinion to evolve and to create different kinds of hypotheses to develop science, to develop art, to develop different kinds of the enterprises, and this is very important. But in our Kwanian society, like I explained, that we have so many senses, we have more than 40 senses that gives us possibility not only to be involved with the world with the touch, sight, but even now we start saying that in human perception we have also much more than we used to say like 20 years ago. But also this is one of the things that we could read, but not really read thoughts, but read some kinds of the intentions. And intentions, reading in its intentions, this is also something that when you read it, you have to somehow to find, for example, if you feel something aggressive towards of you, you have to find solution how to work with this, but immediately, because there is no words, there is no things saying, but you have to be very sensitive and trying to overcome this situation and to find the solution, but on another level. On another level than just to go to the dialogues and try to figure out what is the best for both or for the people around. So this is one of the things that I thought it will be really great if one day we can read not thoughts. I think to read thoughts is ugly because it can be sometimes very unpleasant, but at least to read intention. And to try already be in some sort of the collaborative and trying to find some sort of the way to be together. And because of this, for me, Kwanian is just such a society, maybe utopical society, but that arrive on some sort of the level of coexistence between Kwanian and another species, because there is another species and we do understand them, that somehow also links to the very old theory I read articles about, that maybe a human that we know now, they are also passed by different kinds of the stages, and one of them, it was but very long ago, and just it's, I think Steiner mentioned it, like before even Greek civilization, it was also people who had a lot of senses and they can feel tide of the sea, they can feel the changes of the different kinds of the constellation, and at the same time they were in some sort of the joined to the nature, in unity with the nature. And what we really do miss, like human, because like we had a lot of now, for example, to put a lot of satellites, and just it's also a question that you put a lot of satellites or you put another object in the sky, and okay, it's praised for you, but sometimes disturbing other people, and so we don't think about it. And I'm really afraid when all this sky will be with satellites of Elon Musk, so what we will see actually at the end. Yes, but this is utopical society, but I hope that in some moment human also arrive in some level that we overcome all this contradiction and all efforts will be put together to follow our evolution, but in another, maybe in another 200 or 500 years. And I think that I gave you answer, and just like I have also a question for you, because as your article really, first of all, I was really struggle what kinds of questions I can ask, because it's a lot that I would like to ask. And also your cogito in space, this is also something very important in sense of imagine the Earth. And what I like about your experiment, about your artwork, that you propose virtual reality. Virtual reality, this is also something that gives you much more perception and much more instability, because in this case you can see the Earth, but also you can create working with virtual reality that you don't feel yourself stable in sense of the being in some space on the earth and just not feeling this gravity. And at some moment I also thought, but maybe it's interesting also when you're doing this experiment, try some sort of the state of the floating in the air, because it really could give to your spectator, your visitor who is with the encephalogram tools, that really uncertainty, because I guess the overview effect is coming when you're outside of the Earth, you are floating, and you are floating and physically, not only floating in the spaceship, but you're floating physically in your room. And in this case, your senses are much more aguë and much more precise, and so that you feel that the Earth is so far, is so small, and it's so vulnerable. And this again about your article, because for me it was very interesting to read it. And another things that also you are talking about how our mind and body work together, how this junction between these, even if we know that it's very difficult to create brain without body, because brain is growing with the body, so it means the body, this is a part of the brain. And also brain has all this like we name it cartography, or just like maps on its surface to what kinds of the part of the body it belongs. But also this is one of my question to you, for example, when you start to work with this, and did you have some kinds of your personal impact? Because at the beginning you worked with the dance, and so it means that you work a lot with the body, and the body in a space, body just it's exhibited to everybody also, and also the body that has to be in some has very performative. So this is some question that how actually from your background you arrived to work with this subject. This is my first question.
Yes, thank you, Alexandra. Actually, I always like to talk about my former experience as a dancer, because it's definitely coming back increasingly every time I make a new project. I see more and more impact of my background. For me, the perception of the body was really a main question in this project, although it's very well disguised, because as you mentioned it is about experiencing the sight of the Earth from outer space through virtual reality. So by definition, virtual reality seems to really engage a form of perception that somehow almost takes the body, disembodied the mind, I think. It depends on the experience, but generally speaking, we really get inside this black box with images and sounds, and we tend to forget about the body, if not in functional terms, in case we are playing a game, for example, or we are engaging in a sort of a fictional reality. But for me, Cognitive Space was really about the participant, the subject. I really stress this concept of subject because it is really about the subjectivity. And this is why the project in its really ideal setting evolves as a sort of performance. So it is actually a performative narrative. So the subject before participating in the experience is led to a walk around the natural surrounding and next to the radio telescope, where eventually they send the brain activity into space from. So there is first a sense of grounding of connection of the body of the person with nature. And this aspect was very much influenced, I think, by my training as a dancer in body-mind centering, which is a technique that really looks at the perception of the internal organ And this perception becomes so deep, so I think subjective, that you really start mapping the inside of your body and feeling the gravity of the organs and feeling how everything is connected with the rest of the reality surrounding you. So you are connected with the ground, you're connected with the air. And these organs, these internal organs, create the gravity and the gravitational relationship between the body and the environment. And then eventually the person is taken to inside the cabin of the Dwingelo radio telescope in the Netherlands, which is very much the site-specific setting of the performance. So again, it is a very, I think, intimate connection between the subject and the architectural space. So without this narrative, there couldn't be a proper experience, eventually leading to the fact that this person sits on a chair, on a reclining chair, and then immerse herself or himself into this virtual reality experience. So it is really well connected. But of course, this is not explicit, as I want to keep it really open for each person to just have a deeply personal experience and, you know, give as much intellectual freedom as possible to each participant. And I think, if you don't mind, I'd like to continue on the relationship between insects and space and tardigrades. And because I think we both touched upon the issue of creating a possible dialogue between, in your case, tardigrades and humans, and in my case, between a cockroach and a possible extraterrestrial intelligence. And we both look at, in a way, at animal ethics and how, for example, in some animal ethics studies, we look at how at the extremely difficult task to empathize with some being that is so incredibly different from us. And in my case, I mentioned Thomas Nagel and his essay about bats, and Nagel points out how difficult it is, how practically impossible it is to empathize with any being that is has a sensorial experience of reality that is greatly different from ours, let alone empathizing with another human being. That is already hard enough. But you mentioned this beautiful idea of this DNA synthesis amongst different beings. And that immediately led me to actually something I read about some time ago. I am just quoting this beautiful book that's by one of the collaborators in my current project, Thomas Moinian, is an intellectual historian. And he mentions that two researchers, I believe from Japan, Yoku and Oshima, they thought that the DNA could contain signs of intentionality, and that might have been encrypted within terrestrial DNA by extraterrestrial intelligence. So the DNA could be a sort of exo-artifact, a sort of signature of an extraterrestrial intelligence. So this really resonated with what you actually write about, you know, the possibility of using DNA as a form of really intrinsic communication amongst different species. I would just like maybe you to kind of just tell us a little bit more about this idea that I find really fascinating.
Well, first of all, I think it's a lot of things happening now in research about DNA. And for example, there is a different kinds of the research that I've heard about that links to, because DNA more or less, it's like if we will take binary code, this is 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, we can write a lot of, even we can write a book in this 0, 1, so except that it will be very, very big. And DNA also, this is letters. So just like A, B, so I don't remember. Immediately I don't say you all the letters, but just it's letters. So it means that if there is a letter or there is 0, 1, so we can encode a lot of things. So DNA in this case also can serve just like a database. Imagine that we decided to encode all, for example, I don't know, Middle East crisis in DNA, and just to conserve it for a future generation that they can read it later and just understand how it's difficult and how it's important to know what happened before. So and the DNA for me also, this is some sort of like a book, so we can read it. So idea is to put together, in my case, Quanian with human, and to give this possibility to construct the common DNA. Again, one more that just normal, like we see in an example with nature, that species normally they have their own order, so they are not really go in some sort of the crossing. So this is a little bit like more mad idea, but I thought just it will be nice because as Quanian is sentient, so maybe human sentient, maybe it will be possibility to find this crossing between two DNA. And at the same time, for me, it's the idea also, if we can put somebody in the, and even this like in our own life, there is some kind of the proverb, I don't remember exactly how it sounds, but it's something that just try to put yourself on somebody's place and after decide if you will do this or not, because for what's this person. So it means that if we have some possibility to cross in DNA, definitely it's very maybe it's not very ethical, but still, so we can also give the possibility of the being who will be born from this crossing to have different kinds of senses, not senses only belong to one species, but belongs to several, and to apprehend the reality of in others. And I think it's main things that being in an anthropocentric world, we are more or less always talking about ourselves, about our vision, but in the same time, we completely whipped out what is links to another species. And this is what I think very bad for nature, because and what we see with what's happening now with the nature, it's actually, this is our actions that sweeping it out. So like what I can say, because it's definitely it's a lot of imagination, because for me art is also some kinds of the metaphor that we construct about about reality, and this is metaphor that we would like to share, because it gives us much more possibility to be maybe not more clear, more understandable, but at least imaginative, that people can associate this metaphor with themselves. And this is sometimes is also very good when we can explain different kinds of the scientific discovery going through metaphor, because it's much easier for people, especially that they don't know, I don't know very well physics or especially quantum physics. I really prefer somebody explaining me in some sort of another way. So examples that deals for.
I'm sorry. Alexandra, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, and this is such a fantastic conversation, and I'm sorry, but we do have a few other conversations that I do need to initiate. I'm really very inspired by all this conversation that between the two of you about empathy, about communication, about telling the story across, you know, species across time, about encoding information in DNA. This is all such critical conversation. So I'm very sorry to cut you short, but I do want to introduce our next pair of conversants, who is Saskia Vermeulen and Olesya Turkina. Saskia wrote for Space Art as a critique of space law. She is a Chancellor's Fellow in the Law School at the University of Stratklide, Scotland. She is currently the recipient of a Leverhulme Trust Fellowship to study utopian literatures and space law. And she is the curator of the exhibition Extra Activism and Decolonizing Space Mining. Welcome. And I'm welcoming Olesya Turkina, who wrote Dreams of the Earth and Sky. She is senior researcher at the Russian Museum and an associate professor at St. Petersburg State University. She's a member of the Northwest branch of the Russian Federation of Cosmonauts since 1999. She has curated countless exhibitions of contemporary art, including space-related shows, and has written numerous articles and books, including Soviet Space Dogs, published by Fuel in 2014. Welcome to Saskia and Olesya. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Erika, and thank you to Lydia as well for the very kind invitation for a legal theorist to infiltrate this amazing panel. And it's quite daunting to be surrounded by so many great minds working in an area that I hugely admire and try to learn from in my legal practice. So I'm absolutely delighted to be twinned with Olesya, whose work I knew already, but it was an absolute delight to read her article, which actually really speaks to some of my own research that I'm currently exploring. So I'm very much interested in anything to do with property as a legal theorist, and particularly with the commercial space race, and that we're really struggling with our current space legislation to govern that in a sustainable, inclusive way. And hence that I sort of look outside the law and into utopian and also dystopian literatures to find inspiration, what we actually have to change in our legislation to govern that space. So I was really very much inspired and really interested how Olesya explains in her article about Russian cosmisms and this kind of vision, this utopian vision of artists, engineers coming together and have this really beautiful idea of hope, sort of really part of that thinking of going into outer space. And it's something that I'm actually really missing in my kind of discipline, how we currently think about what needs to change in the law. So my question is actually, how Olesya, how you would think about seeking further inspiration in cosmisms for any kind of new thinking around what needs to change in this era of the commercialization into the new space era we're currently in.
Thank you so much, Saskia. Thank you so much, Erika, Lydia, Nicholas, everybody. I like really so much our all girls cosmonaut team, and I guess it's a great break with patriarchal rules in a space area and a space subject. So, and wow, Saskia, I would then put my question, express my gratitude to your article. I studied a lot, and first I would love to answer briefly, because you know, Russian cosmism is such a huge subject that I wish I would be dead already, that you could resurrect me, so to discuss. That's an amazing, like, you know, thing that, like, actually, let's say, to simplify, immortality and colonization become two very fashionable subjects for today. With commercialization of space and the idea that wealthy ones could live or should live forever, we have a kind of continuation, the old ideas. But the difference is that, as you told already, underlined that Russian cosmism, or what we know under this common name, that started not even with Nikolai Fedorovich Fedorov, but even early, because Russian cosmism based on the literary scientific ideas from the beginning of the 19th century. Russian cosmism been really utopian and addressed to the humankind as much as first space law you discussed in your brilliant article, that in spite of the Cold War been so, let's say, so utopian and so much taken care about, let's say, fair play and about equality. So in a way, this idea about immortality become attributed to the certain smaller elite part of the population. But speaking about Fedorov and his followers, immortality was something that had to do with the common task of humankind, to resurrect the passed away dead ones, generation after generation, or better to say before generation, and the museums. So because he called those, spaces museum, in a way that museum preserves an object, and to resurrect, not just to have a dead working body, but to resurrect, to create the new kind of beings that are supposed to be aeronautic beings who are going to change the way to consume, to use a space race, but not to use a space race, let's say, energy, but not to eat animals or plants or whatever. And speaking from this point of view, that's also could be very profitable for us as well to think about ecological problem and how we could change our habit and how we can change ourselves not only in our soul, from the point of view of our soul, but from the point of view of our body. Let's say start with the point that we are supposed to be vegetarians. Even the followers of Nikolai Fedorovich Fedorov, Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, he told that in the future planetary flights, all the participants, they're going to be vegetarians, because actually the simple reason they can't grow, let's say, meat. And plus, if you grow somebody in the space, so it becomes so dear to you, you just can't kill and eat it, like, and then I'm also like very much this, like, idea that I would love to return to your question, that really how it's happened that, let's say, the whole world just was turned upside down. What you discussed in a brilliant space art as a critique of space law article, how it's happened that during the most difficult tension, it was announced that this outer space belongs to the humankind. And right now, when, let's say, in a way, this kind of obvious tensions, in a way, let's hope over, yeah, there is no Cold War, fortunately, not yet. And we have this idea of new colonization. We have an idea that human beings, they have to colonize a space, and then they have to share, and now they're discussing to whom belong resources on the moon, on Mars, and to whom belong asteroids. What's happened with the world? Could you specify this, Saskia? It's extremely important question, very, very contemporary.
Thanks, Alicia. Thanks. Yeah, it's yeah, something that really preoccupies me a lot. And often when I say in a legal, for a legal audience, that I find are like the Outer Space Treaty in a way that it has some utopian elements. Sometimes I get a few frowns because I think a lot of people are actually very frustrated about the Outer Space Treaty, and then we've got the failed Moon Agreement. But if we think about it, that this was being negotiated at the height of the Cold War, and this vision that indeed outer space should belong to humankind, and that everybody should have access to it, and even though the Moon Agreement has not been ratified, but still it is part of the space law kind of thinking, that if there would ever be any kind of exploitation of the resources in a commercial manner, that the benefits accrued from it needs to be shared with also the nations, peoples who do not have the technological means to travel to space. And if you compare that with the current climate, yeah, I think the utopianism becomes even more stark when we see that, for example, Luxembourg and the United States have passed legislation allowing commercialization of the resources. So I think the Cold War, this kind of paranoia, this idea, and I think Sputnik was definitely a really important event in all of this. This idea that suddenly there was this spy in the sky really caused kind of an upheaval and really sparked an acceleration around this idea that we need to make sure that there is some sort of check and balances between these two superpowers of what's happening in space. But what I also find very interesting, and what I explore in my article, is also thinking about when we were negotiating the outer space law, that this is at a time when African countries were fighting for their independence. And they did play a really important role into that thinking and kind of influencing the idea that outer space should not become the next frontier, becoming colonized. And this is what I explore very much in the article, how particularly African artists have something to say about the contemporary problems we're dealing with. And that kind of links to the next question I would like to ask you, Felicia, is the role of space art in particular, about what role it can play in terms of thinking about maybe finding an ethical or a normative justification to travel into space. And I recently listened to a podcast by the space philosopher James Schwartz, saying that that science, for example, has an ethical and normative role to play, and even he calls it like an obligation, that science has an obligation to go into outer space, to do the experiments, to learn, and in a way as a buffer against the Elon Musks in this world. And I'm just wondering if you think that artists have a similar role to play, and a really very important role to play, to be that buffer against a colonization of space.
Thank you so much, Saskia. I believe in artists. Art is my religion. So for sure, artists are ethical, and I would say that even what actually Alexandra explained so beautifully before, art is an ethical par excellence, because artists and art gives a metaphorical way, a metaphorical shelf for event. I still remember, like, you know, I was doing an exhibition in London, and it was called Beyond Zero, and it was represented an installation of conceptual artists Elena Ilagina and Igor Makarevich, and they created a beautiful installation called Dark Matter. And then astronomer from Greenwich Observatory came and told, this is the first time when I realized what does it mean dark matter, because you know dark matter is the most difficult question to for understanding. So the ethic of art is to give a thought, like, you know, to make something invisible visible and understandable, and to preserve it in a way like Fedorov proposed, to resurrect in the whole body. And then coming back, for example, from artist to cosmonaut. Actually, many artists, they're making art, they're making beautiful photos and cinema and films. In some of the artists, like, for example, as you know very well, Alexei Leonov, he was a wonderful artist who been making drawings and pictures and representing all these amazing, you know, atmospheric effects, etc. And so, coming back to cosmonaut, for example, had a chance to speak to cosmonaut Yuri Baturin, who told, as many cosmonauts told as well, the main lessons, the main lesson they got when they are coming back from the space station, that the Earth is so fragile. So to take care and to keep Earth, probably it would be a good reason if we are going to have this commercial space flight, not to send a businessman or rock stars or somebody else. They're dead already, you know, because, you know, okay, they're done. Success is a poison. So if person is successful, he is dead. I'm sorry, dear listener, I hope it doesn't. And so better to send schoolboys and schoolgirls. Let's reserve first commercial space flights to Mars and to Moon for the schools. And let's send them there that they could imagine that Earth, planet Earth is fragile and they should save. And as David Bowie, like, you know, in his famous song, told, the planet Earth is blue and nothing I can do, you see? And then this is the main and the ethic. And what is important as well, that artists sometimes, and I believe deeply in it, artists, writers, musicians, they in a way preview something that could be realized in the future, that we know so much, like Herbert W. Wells or Jules Verne's novels inspired scientists and engineers. The first they understood that's not right. This vehicle is not going to fly. And then they started counting. And they counted and they sent vehicles, like, you know, to the space, to the outer space, and vice versa. And particularly, I'm interested in discussed in my article this question when artists been working with a real space program. And that I would love to return to make a follow and to return my question to you, because you described one of my favorite work, the work of Nuatama Bodoma, how to make a stress.
Bodoma.
Nuatama Bodoma, this film, Astronauts. And that's an amazing story. I was laughing like a mad. I saw this by chance. I was in MoMA in New York. And I entered, I was really inspired by title. I came in and I mean, it reminded me so much a Soviet sci-fi from the 50s and 60s, because this very utopian impulse. But what you discussed in your article, I would love to ask you to develop this a little bit more further, that, like, you know, this escaping into the future gives a new angle to the current political situation. How it's happened, how it's possible. And this is a very ethical approach, actually.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that question. I find her work incredibly inspiring to actually ask these really very difficult kind of ethical questions that we kind of grappling with at the moment, particularly as legal practitioners. How to govern this commercial space. But what I think Bodoma's film really does very nicely as well is to show an alternative vision and using a sort of colonial archive as a way to hold us responsible of space travel has already been very elitist, and for those of you who may not be familiar with her short film, which is now turning into a longer movie, she's using as a starting point the Zambian space program, which was being developed at the start of Zambia's independence, and a school science teacher said, like, well, it's not going to be an American or a Russian man to be being the first on the moon, but it's going to be a Zambian woman who's going to be the first on the moon. And Bodoma works with that canon of the Zambian space program, and her first woman on the moon is she casts an albino woman to play the role of Martha. And I find it really interesting how many questions that kind of opens up in how we need to think about space law and how to think about the future. And for me, that film inspires me to think about, and it kind of links to the previous conversation about these entanglements of human, non-humans, humans, microbes, humans, robots, and how actually the law, that we need to think about these entanglements and use these entanglements to move away from a very anthropocentric idea around how we're going to govern these spaces. And surprisingly, you know, these are the questions which are not being raised at the moment if we think about where to go next with space law. So it's kind of frustrating sometimes to draw a blank if you try to open up these questions. So I think for me, this is where art really plays a very important role, and where particularly the work of Bodoma by using a sort of colonial archive to think about a future, a kind of utopian future in a way, really opens up for me all the right kind of questions we need to confront now in order to preserve and this outer space, but also, and I saw that some people in the chat.
I'm sorry, I want to make room for the last pair to discuss. We could talk about this all day, and I'm just so thrilled with the diverse breadth of discussion that we're having, really speaking to all sorts of contemporary, you know, points of ethics and of rights and civil rights and compassion, and but to bring it back to a different conversation. Thank you so much to the two of you, and you know, I'm very pleased with the parents and the commonalities that we're finding between our contributors to this special issue, and I think that speaks a lot to the commonalities and the transdisciplinarity that Leonardo champions between individuals and disciplines. So thank you for contributing today. And with that, I would like to introduce our last final pair of contributors. We're going to introduce Bettina Forget and Lindi Elkins-Tänton. Bettina Forget's contribution to the special issue is Women with Impact, Taking One Small Step into the Universe. Bettina Forget is an artist, educator, and researcher. She is the director of the SETI's Institute Artist in Residence program in Mountain View, California, and director of the Visual Voice Gallery in Montreal, Canada. Lindi Elkins-Tänton wrote The Frozen Darkened Soul Rises into Space, Travels in Siberia and the Plight of Life on Earth, which is the endnote to our special issue. Lindi is the principal investigator of the NASA Psyche mission, the managing director of the Interplanetary Initiative at Arizona State University, and co-founder of Beagle Learning, a tech company providing training in and measuring collaborative problem solving and critical thinking. Welcome, Lindi and Bettina.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. And thank you for including me in this phenomenal panel. And my head is buzzing with all these ideas and thoughts that we've already discussed in this time here. And thank you for pairing me with Lindy. When I first saw what she does, I thought, oh, you know, scientists, I have an art background, like how it's going to work, but we have so many connection points between our two articles. That was really fascinating, and we've been chatting like crazy on the side here, which you can't see, but we'll talk about. And Lindy, I really loved your article. I enjoyed reading it. I mean, just the title, like the frozen, darkened soul, like, right, it's just so poetic. And you allude to the importance of connecting art and science, and your writing is already art. I was reminded of Alexander von Humboldt, who did these really evocative narratives of his travels to faraway places that seemed very foreign and otherworldly at his time. And he learned from Goethe to really sort of color his narrative with more than scientific fact. And I found that your article does very much that. You speak of
so
your—
kind. I might just faint right now to be compared with Alexander von Humboldt. It would be such a hero.
Yeah, I think to both of us, right? Because you know, he also drew a lot from the arts, and I mean, so does your writing. And
well, and really just to interject very briefly to say that I was so thrilled when we were paired, because when I read your article, I saw so much art and so much science together. And I really, I deflect the notion that art and science are really disparate things. They're just ways that all of us humans try to apprehend our world.
Yes, and I think these are such artificial boundaries that also restrict us and the world, the sort of view that we have of ourselves and our capabilities and the capabilities of others. So what we really need to do is to sort of follow our own North Star, our own passions, which you really do. I loved how you described your field work, being in Siberia, the experience of you and the landscape. And there's this quote that I picked out, like you described the vast wilderness felt too big to fit into the earth I knew. It's just, that was just so lovely. So I'd like you to talk about what it was like for you to be doing field work, also as a woman, like in you know, in Russia, as you know, your narrative is really like this adventure story, but you also offer critique about the impact that you have as a researcher in the landscape and the impact of your research on like environment and indigenous people. So can you elaborate a bit on that?
I thank you so much. It's a lovely introduction. And so indeed, we had a very large project that involved scientists from, there were about 30 scientists from 8 different countries. And most of the fieldwork happened in Russia. And my particular part of the project, we had 5 field seasons in central Siberia, everywhere from down in the south, not too far from Lake Baikal, in Uсть-Ilimsk on the Angara River, and then in central Siberia near Tura on the Nizhnaya Tunguska River, and then in the far north, both near Norilsk and then also by a small town called Hanga on an inlet to the Arctic Ocean. And in these different explorations, I was out in the field with usually a group of 4 or 5 people, sometimes an American graduate student with me, but mostly with my Russian colleagues. And it was astonishing to see from the helicopters. We would get dropped by helicopter out on these rivers, and then we'd spend several weeks in boats or hiking by ourselves, hundreds and hundreds of kilometers from anyone. And to see the size of Siberia, even for someone who lives now in the American Southwest, and I can be in a plane and look over the deserts of the western part of North America, Siberia is so gigantic. And to see it is almost to see an ocean, only it's a land. And the beauty of it is breathtaking. And so when we were in the little towns, that's when I would understand the human connection with this vastness. And one part of what I experienced that you and I have been chatting about is what it is to be a woman leader in science, particularly in exploration. I think of all the parts of human endeavor, exploration is one of the hardest places for women to find a foothold. It's really thought to be the world of the male hero. And so I would be in these tiny towns, and we would go to the little tiny grocery stores, and I had, you know, a year of intensive Russian, and I could say "Здравствуйте" and "Очень приятно," and I would have little conversations with the women working in the stores, and they would always, as soon as the men went away, they would bring out, you know, the berry liqueur that they had made from the previous year and give us little drinks, and we would drink to each other's health and immediately become best friends. And we would learn how many children we each had and where we lived. And then they would always tell me that geology is no work for a woman, and that I should go home and be with my husband and my son right away. And I would just leave them shaking their heads, and I would think, what gender am I? You know, I'm not a Russian woman. I'm not a Russian man. I'm not an American man. You know, what am I doing? I would feel so alienated from all the different parts of where I was. And then we would see the indigenous peoples, the Evenks and the other people who had lived in Central Siberia and now increasingly displaced. And all these things together made me think more and more about what we all know, which is that exploration is the devastation and suffering of indigenous peoples. And that exploration has always been for the financial betterment of mainly the wealthy men of the community. And so I really see space exploration as a way for us to do it right, a way for us to be the society that we know we can be, and to become that inspiration for creating things better on Earth. And so I was so excited about your art project and the fact that you look at the moon with the beautiful telescope that I see behind you over your shoulder, and you look at the moon and you see the craters. Now, imagine how exciting it was for me to read this paper, knowing something that Bettina did not know, and I don't think Diana knew, which is that I've spent about half of my career studying the geology of the moon and studying the craters on the moon. And so I'm so familiar with the beautiful things that you've been staring at. And I've been so struck over and over again by how many men there are named. You know, you go to Venus, it's named after women. Everything else in the solar system is named after men. And thinking about what our position is in this place. And then you created this art project where we could put on the bottom of our boots the impressions of craters. And as we walked, we could make our own craters here on Earth. And I thought that was so beautiful and evocative. And so I'm so interested to hear you talk about not just the materials, because when we create our craters with our boots, they're transient. They're in the sand at the seashore. They're going to come and go. The craters on the moon are made of rock and hardened lava, and they will be there for the age of the solar system. And the dichotomy of this, which I believe is driven by the hero model, which brings us back to exploration. If our hero is the one man who is the astronaut who could do the thing, that is actually not creating inclusion. It's creating a barrier. Because I never see myself in that person doing that thing. And so, you know, what is the prevalence of the posture of the hero, the singular expert, the leader filled with confidence and assertion in your field? And what is the relative importance of raising others up as opposed to raising oneself up, which is what I mainly see in academia and in exploration. And I think that your gorgeous work addresses all of that. I would love to hear you talk about it.
Oh, thank you. That's a really great question. Because we had that hero story both in the arts and in science, you know, like the Einstein genius, you know, single-handedly will fill the whole blackboard with like these fantastic equations. That's a trope. But on the other hand, we have people like Jackson Pollock, genius, swirl some art around, best artist in North America. So, you know, obviously, and these are sort of these male hero types, and that is echoed in how we mark places as well. My inspiration for the Woman with Impact series was because only like less than 2% of all moon craters are named after women. And it's important how we name things on Earth, how we, Lucy Lippert says, like our cities, our mirrors, you know, we live in them and we sort of co-shape them and they shape us and we shape it. And I find that this idea of the hero stories is so inaccurate, both in art and science. Actually, science is very collaborative. And it's always teams, and even in the arts, especially now in contemporary practice, it's so collaborative. It's cross-disciplinary, transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary. We work as you know, collaborators. Like everybody here who talk was sort of alluding to the fact that we're sort of inspired by and working with other people. And I think that is a much more accurate and healthy way to approach it as a network of individuals embedded in a network that is our world, our environment. We know that we're one species of many. I think the sort of rhizome approach to life and us is much, leads to more creativity and breakthroughs than this. So we talked about boundaries. The individual as a boundary is a problem. You know, we need to open that up. And of course, the power dynamics and hierarchies that are implied through that hero model is that it is a male hero, and women can or have a really hard time breaking into the STEM field, breaking into sciences, because you're always being the other who breaks in. That's and right. When we're looking at female achievements, even in the arts, it's always, oh, women, they just work very hard, don't they? They're just so meticulous. And this is why they're making nice things. And the men are just, you know, they wake up in the morning and then they just write a novel. That's just how that
They're
happens.
Just geniuses.
They're just inborn geniuses. And I think art and what we're doing and what you're doing can really help break that, especially by breaking the art and science boundaries. I think we're breaking the associated gender stereotypes. And that is a sort of central part of also of my work. And something that you alluded to in your article as well, the idea that art can actually help us to be better humans on this planet. And I would love to find out more about the Psyche-inspired project that you have instigated, where you're bringing artists in to work on the Psyche mission and the perspective that you're taking on this.
I know we don't have time to talk about that. Unfortunately, Erica has let us know it's the end, although I would love to. I could invite everyone to look at our website, psyche.asu.edu, and see what NASA has funded us to do with artists. And thank you for making that a possibility that I could mention.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I'm sorry to cut you off. Thank you to everyone for participating today. I had hoped to have a few minutes for questions and discussions, so I know that we're at the end of the hour, so I invite anyone who needs to leave, and we can take just maybe 5 or 10 minutes more to discuss amongst everyone, if that's all right. I don't know how anyone feels about that. Five more minutes? 5 more minutes. Okay, great. So we did have some good questions in the chat. If you did not have the opportunity to see those as they came past, there are a lot of questions and discussions, and I'm really excited to see all of the engagement that we've had between the panelists and our participants. We've had quite a few people watching today, and thank you for joining us. So we have, I think a lot of the questions are about ethics, about tardigrades crashing on the moon, about decolonization of space. Do we leave Mars for the Martians, as Carl Sagan suggested? Are we living within a realized fiction made by societal decisions? What insights can you give to us as participants and readers of the cosmos? So I open this up to our panelists today.
Sorry. Yes, so this is a question that's, well, first of all, in my article, I made such supposition, but it's also, maybe it's not like this, because there is, like, you know, there is a theory, like we name it panspermia, that maybe some molecules or some kinds of the bacteria arrived to the Earth with some different kinds of the meteorite or some kinds of another celestial bodies. So maybe even it's come from another space. But in the another question that definitely it's very very important, because when we go to study something, and if we are doing it, we have to be very careful because of the environment. So even this accident crashing of the tardigrade on the moon can create different kinds of the problems in future, if we can imagine that there is some kinds of the possible life there. So I think that we have to be very careful with this. This is my answer about this question, that we can't really bring another life, another being on another planets.
I'd like to follow a question with that on the ethics of our impact, literally the impact we're making, our footprint, and the metaphorical impact of what we may be overlooking, of the unintended consequences, and how we try and anticipate those, and come back if possible to Bettina and Lindy, because your time was cut short since we're here for a few more minutes, and ask you about how your work, both with your art, Bettina, and your transdisciplinary creative work, Lindy, is advancing ethical impact.
Lindy, go ahead. You had to cut off.
Well, I can't say that I have a really fantastic answer right off the bat, but I would say that we have been working very hard in Interplanetary Initiative to develop new ways to put together teams that are interdisciplinary and where every discipline's voice is heard, because very often in these collaborations, one voice is valued above another just because of a bias about disciplines, let alone about the nature of the people involved. And when it comes to things like our impact on other bodies or transmitting life forms, that's something that really everyone's voice needs to be heard. We need to hear from sociologists and psychologists and philosophers, not just biologists or planetary scientists. However, in a sense, that ship has sailed, because whatever body we have put a spacecraft down on, we have contaminated with Earth life. No matter how clean we try to make it, there is no such thing as 100% sterile. And so perhaps thinking about what this means for the interconnectedness of all life is a path forward. Bettina, I think you must have tremendous responses to this question.
I mean, I agree. And I think what artists can bring to the scientists is that critical perspective, where scientists go like, let's colonize, let's exploit asteroids. And then the artists come in, and also at the SETI Institute with those artist-scientist collaborations, the artists ask these questions that nobody else had thought of. And they are mostly from a moral ethical perspective, or the what if perspective, and connecting science to the human condition and making us more aware about what we're doing, and asking the question that scientists can't really ask as part of their scientific method, because they need to be objective about what it is they're doing. And the flip side of it is artists need to be subjective about what it is we're doing. And I think that's a beautiful balance. And when that dialogue happens, again, there's this blurring of boundaries. And in any case, I question how objective scientists really are, and I question how subjective sometimes artists are. I think, again, these are these sort of archetypes that we construct that don't always are consistent with real life. But it's good to at least think in those terms and question them.
I love that, yeah.
Well, we've come to the end of the 5 minutes I allotted for additional conversation, and I've been so excited and really very energized by all of the conversation today. And not only that, but the last 6 months or so of collaboration that I've had with all of you that's been a wonderful experience, and so very, very proud of the project that we have done, the journal issue that we have put together. I would like to encourage everyone who's watching to read this journal. It is available through the MIT Press website, which is mitpressjournals.org. It is also available through university subscriptions to aggregator services such as JSTOR. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to Lydia, Thank you to the CYLAND team. Thank you to everyone who watched today, and please continue to connect, to collaborate, and to create with us. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Erika.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Hope you can
Bye.
see
Much. Спасибо.
Bye. Thank you.
До свидания.